reveres for the ages. Shogun.
I am a bit conflicted on how I feel about this show because I kept going back and forth. Shogun. This just feels like a good historical Asian drama. They're all speaking Japanese, so everything's like subtitles. There is English in this just because it's from the perspective of this English sailor that washed up on the shores of Japan back during the feudal times. And it was also based on a book that I haven't read. And this whole story is kind of like from his perspective. So I think that is the only thing that kind of sets this TV show apart from like your average historical Asian drama, because we're looking at it from the sailor, John Blackthorne's point of view. When he gets to Japan, he's completely in culture shock, questioning everything at first, but then throughout the course of the show, he does learn to understand it better. And I think that was a good character progression for him. He even like learns how to speak Japanese in the end, kind of. And I'm like, wow, his Japanese got good real fast. As I was watching this show, the whole back and forth was me being like, everyone who talks about this, they talk about how cool the Japanese stuff in this is. I was like really excited to see all of the Japanese elements. And then you have like this white dude, John Blackthorne. He's there. And I'm like, why is he here? I know this is based on a book and this is from his perspective, but the whole time I'm watching this, I kind of just want to see the struggle to become shogun. I wanted to see the interactions between these warlords and their political parties or whatever. And then you just have Blackthorne just being there. And he's like somehow this really important chess piece, but I'm like, why is he so important? I guess he has guns. I guess he knows stuff about the Portuguese. But there were so many moments in this show where like Blackthorne was just in the right place at the right time. Is this just gonna be another like white savior kind of a story? You know, if you took him out of this story, it still would have been a good show. So I'm like, why do we need him here? And then his whole thing with Mariko, I could see the whole romance from a mile away. They're not gonna do this right. Oh my gosh, she can't really like him, right? Because I know she's like his translator. You could see that she had some feelings towards him, the way she was looking at him, the way she was kind of intrigued by how different he was compared to your average Japanese man at the time, treated their wives like property, whereas Blackthorne apparently is just respects women in a different way. I don't know. It was weird because he was a little bit too good. Why is he this saint? When I was watching it, I was rooting for them. I was just like, oh my God, they're kind of cute together. And then when they finally got together, I was like, oh yay. And then like looking back, I'm like, wait, did I just fall into the whole white guy, Asian female kind of a trap? But then in the end, it played out well because it was so emotional. Okay, I'm gonna spoil this. It was so emotional after she became this important sacrifice to eventually turn the tides. Most of this story is about the feud between the main guy, Toranaga, which is based off of a real person, Tokugawa Ieyasu. I learned about him, but I don't remember much. The thing is, if you know about his story and you know this is based on him, you already know that Toranaga wins at the end. Okay, I just spoiled everything, but I don't think anyone was surprised that he came out on top. This whole feud was between him and Ishido, this other guy who's also powerful. Ishido's like trying to get rid of Toranaga because he sees him as a threat. He's like kind of evil. Like we all know we're against him and we're all kind of on Toranaga's side. He's made out to be like this really honorable man, but you're also supposed to understand that he has blood on his hands as well. I think the show could have made it more gray because I don't know, maybe it was me, but I was just like, I was never rooting for Ishido. I don't think anyone would root for him. I don't think you're supposed to root for him, but I think this whole political drama would have been interesting if us as the audience had a harder time deciding which side we were on. But from the beginning to the end, we were mostly on Toranaga's side and we were hoping for his victory. And he does win in the end. So there were no real surprises there. Like even in the beginning when Toranaga was outwardly saying he doesn't want to become shogun, it's like, yeah, you do. We all know you do. You just can't say it. And then also in the end, when he like Ishido kind of corners him or he thinks he's cornered him and Toranaga's like kind of surrendering. In my mind, I was like, it's so obvious it's part of your plan. Who here actually believes you're surrendering? He actually jumps through a lot of hoops, sacrifices a couple of people and does a lot of things to make it more convincing. But even so, even the lady who owned the brothel was not convinced because she asked him if she could build a tea house in Edo, which later becomes Tokyo, which is actually pretty cool. There wasn't too much tension, I think. I knew he was going to come out on top, but like, how was he going to do it? Was there going to be this big dramatic battle at the end when Toranaga reveals his plan to Yabushige, the traitor that didn't really choose a side and he was just bouncing around just trying to survive? We're all waiting for this battle and then Toranaga's like, what are you talking about? It's already over. The moment I had Mariko sacrifice herself. I already convinced Ochiba to not lend Ishido the heir's army. They didn't actually show it, but they sort of showed like a flash forward vision of Toranaga's of how things would go down. We just assume that things happen the way that Toranaga is envisioning because he has always been several steps ahead of everyone. He is what you would define as a visionary leader. He's so good at like not showing his cards. Everyone in this show had like poker faces. They were like hiding a lot of stuff behind their 8-fold fence or whatever. And the only person who was wearing his heart on his sleeve was Blackthorne, which was an interesting contrast, and I think it works because it's kind of funny. People are going to be divided on the end because there was no big battle we were all waiting for. It kept the tone of the show pretty level. Like there was no super dramatic stuff that happened in the show. So I think the ending works. It felt very calm. It made sense. It was a cool revelation. I don't know, but for some reason, the way they did it kind of reminded me of like Twilight. If you have seen Twilight, you might know what I'm talking about. There was supposed to be this big battle, but then Alice sort of shows the Volturi leader what happens without it actually happening. I'm actually fine with it because I'm not a fan of fighting anyways. So I thought it was cool that he won without having to fight. Toranaga was so cool because he did so many things that he didn't even have to do himself. He just let everyone around him like do all the work for him. I feel like the last few episodes, he was just sitting on a chair up in the mountains, like viewing stuff. And I was like, where's Toranaga? Is he like still mourning the death of his son? Okay, the death of his son was also a weird scene. The scene was so funny. It wasn't supposed to be funny, but Toranaga's brother kind of betrays him and he's like at this brothel, okay? He just pillowed a girl and then he puts on this like giant white robe and it just shows how long it is because it's like on the ground. And I'm just like, why is the robe so long? And then a couple minutes later, there's a scene where Toranaga's son is trying to assassinate him and then he just slips on the robe, hits his head on a rock and dies. His death actually ended up being a good thing because it gave Toranaga like 49 days to mourn, which is 49 days of time to strategize. So then most of the time he was kind of just strategizing. He was just thinking. He was just playing chess, reading people like their books. The opening of the last episode is Blackthorne as an old grandpa laying in bed holding like Mariko's cross necklace and his grandchildren are there and you're like, is this like the future where he actually leaves Japan, ends up back in England? This whole time we were just watching his recollection, like this whole story was just his recollection, and then it kind of wasn't. It was kind of more like a dream. I don't know how I feel about Blackthorne. He seemed kind of extra, but at the same time I guess we kind of needed him to sort of experience the culture shock together. It was a great show, but I don't know. People are saying it's like the beginning of Game of Thrones, and I'm like, yeah, it is kind of like Game of Thrones in Japan without dragons. I'm gonna be honest here, I didn't watch Game of Thrones until I watched House of the Dragon, and I liked House of the Dragon so much that I went back and I binged all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones. So I didn't actually watch it when everyone else was watching it. I don't think I'm into political drama. Because it had dragons, I was like obsessed with it. If you took the dragons out of Game of Thrones, I don't know if I would have liked it so much. So this is kind of like that, where I'm like, yes, the political story is great. I like the schemes. I like the relationships between the people. I liked how it was told. A lot of the conversations were so poetic. The scenes were beautiful. The cinematography was beautiful too. Even the scenes where it was just like raining outside, I was like, wow, this feels so nice. Everything's great, but I'm like, I'm not obsessed with it unless it has dragons or something, or some fantastical element that kicks it up a notch, you know? So it's a good show, but it's not something I would be super obsessed with, I guess.